everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist, composer, film worker, and so many other miscellaneous things, Don Schiff.
Hey, hello. Thank you, Raul, for having me. I appreciate that so much.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. So starting from the beginning, as always, we like to find out about your journey. How did you get started in music and on bass?
Oh, it's a good question. I come from a musical family. My mom and dad were both professional musicians as well as teachers, and both of them fantastic teachers, just really inspired kids. They thought they were getting a music lesson, but underneath, my dad especially was teaching them how to be a great and decent human being under the guise of, I'm teaching you music. But they were great lessons in life. He was a master at it. So, of course, as a young child, I had to rebel. So I wasn't going to be a musician. And I can just remember every year in school, my dad would bring home an instrument and say, here's a trumpet, blow in it, see what it does for you. And I go, oh, no, it hurts my lip. And then on and on and on. The most embarrassing one, even though it's a great instrument, is the baritone horn. And it was really big, and I was in the 6th grade, trying to get the attention of girls. And I thought, this isn't going to get it. And so anyway, by the time I was 13, my dad said, okay, last chance. Here's an electric bass. And I get that you probably don't want to be a musician. And I got that and went, where's this been all my life? Why didn't you start with this one?
Yeah.
And so I gravitated to it and just loved it. And especially when I started playing it, I thought, it's good. My dad was saying, you play roots and fifths. And I thought, there's so much more to this instrument that can be done. And the most amazing thing about it, I thought, is, okay, they say we're playing a C chord. And I went, it's only a C chord if I play a C. But if I play an A on the bass and they play a C chord, well, now I just changed the whole mood of what we're doing. I went, no, that's powerful. I love that.
Yeah.
And then the rhythmic aspect of the instrument, you had full control over everything that was going to happen in the band. So that's how the love affair with bass started. And haven't stopped ever since. Even if I play an instrument that goes 3 octaves higher, in my mind and my heart, I'm just playing bass lines at a higher pitch. It's just
Sure.
the instrument affects me that much. That's where my heart beats. That's where I come from. It's all about bass.
It gives you a greater reach. Now, once you decided on the bass, did you learn from your parents, or did you pursue further studies? Are you self-taught?
Good one. I have a friend that played guitar, and he had the funniest line that I just want to throw out. He was self-taught, and he used to always say he was self-taught by the wrong teacher. But I had good teachers. Growing up in the musical family, I remember going through elementary school, and they would draw the 5 lines in 4 spaces. And I used to think, well, why are we doing that? Doesn't everybody know the names of the notes and the clefs? And so, just growing up in that family, I knew a lot already. And my dad had a teacher for me, and I took a couple lessons on bass, and then I went, I gotta do this on my own. There's something that I want to say with this instrument. And so I went about it on my own and developed a style that way, and something that I liked. And when I thought I would be a professional musician, then my dad said, well, you got to learn to read. And they went, okay. So then learn to read. But he made it so simple, being, like I said, a great teacher. He said, I'm going to show you a group of rhythms. Memorize them. So you never have to figure it out, like, how 8th notes go together, or dotted 8th and a 16th. He goes, remember these groupings. 16th note, 8th note, 16th note, da-da-da-da-da-da, like that. And he says, so you don't have to stop to think about it. All you then have to do is associate what pitch goes with that rhythm. And I thought, that's incredible. I mean, my dad was a great teacher. He made it so simple. Mm-hmm. When I was younger and he was trying to show me piano, he had a silly technique that I laugh at now that I'm older. And he goes, okay, now you're going to play the scale 2 hands. When you roll over the notes, use your 3rd finger of your right hand. And I went, oh, okay. So I did it, and I missed it. And he goes, like I said, 3rd finger of your right hand. Did it again, and I missed it. And he says, give me your hand. And I give him my hand. And he bites my finger and goes, now use the one that hurts. Nailed it.
Yeah, yeah.
He was good.
Very
so, anyway,
cool.
Answer your question. Little lessons and it's self-taught as I liked it.
Then, if I understand correctly, at a relatively young age, you set off for Las Vegas.
Oh, yes. After high school, it was a great culmination of events because I always say serendipity is my best friend because things just line up and roll on no matter how I plan my life or what I'd like to do or see happen. Things happen. So prior to graduation, I used to get hired to go out and play different jobs. And one of the jobs I had, maybe when I was a senior or in 11th grade, this person called me. Her name's Rosalind Kind, and a very nice young woman at the time. She was Barbra Streisand's half-sister. Oh. And she lived in New York, so she used to hire me to back up her act. And then coincidentally, when I graduated high school that summer, her manager called my dad and said, you know, would your son be willing to go to Las Vegas with us? We have a 3-week gig. So my dad said, perfect timing. He's just graduated, sure, go, have fun. So that's how I got to Las Vegas. While I was there, did the 3 weeks, and then when the 3 weeks were up, they were all going to go back to, New York, the East Coast, where we all lived. And I thought, no, this is my start. I'm out of school. I'm out of the house. Let's make this work. And so the manager said, well, if you're going to stay in Las Vegas, they don't want you here. You have to join the musicians union. You came here with us, so you were part of our package, but you're not allowed to stay and work until you join the union. And so to do that, there's certain requirements. And so I said, well, whatever it is, your manager, get me a gig. Mm-hmm. And he goes, okay, meet me in the hotel tomorrow before we leave. And so I meet him in the hotel, and I said, all right, what's my job? And he goes, you're a busboy at this very hotel. And I said, why? And he goes, one of the union stipulations is you can't work as a musician for 6 months. Oh. So I went down to the union hall and I signed up, and they said, that's correct. 6 months, and you have to stay in town, and you have to sign in at this union hall every week, and we have to see you sign in. And he says, they're right. This is the highest paying union for musicians in the country, and we really don't want you here. There's enough musicians, so we're not making it easy. And I said, okay, I understand, but what's the caveat? Isn't there a cap so I don't have to bus tables for 6 months? And they go, well, if you can convince one of the directors of the hotels, and back then there were only 12 major hotels, so 12 showrooms, each having one bass player. So he said, if you can get one of them to vouch and say, we have to have you and only you, then we waive that little thing you have to do. So I said, well, okay, that's probably not going to happen. Let me bus tables. So made the calls to all the contractors that I was available. And, they don't know me. So it's like, yeah, at least they were nice and didn't yell at me for bothering them. Yeah. But while I was there with Rosalind Kind, a saxophone player befriended me who happened to be on the gig with me, and he lived there. And he was in one of the showrooms, and he used to always tell the director, you're looking for a bass player. I know this guy. He's a little kid, and he's bussing tables. And so they went through a couple bass players, and every time he heard somebody complain, he would bring my name up. So finally, the conductor said, okay, go get your busboy. I'll give him an audition. So he came down in the back kitchens where I was, and he said, I got you an audition tonight. After your shift, don't even, go home and change. Just go to the backstage, and he's going to give you an audition. So I went back smelling like pancakes and eggs and everything that I was touching that day, and met the conductor and says, okay, sit down. I had my bass, and he said, okay, this is the show that's in, can you read? And so, of course, going back to my dad, looking at the rhythms and the notes, I go, piece of cake. So you don't have anything in here that I can't read or understand. And he goes, okay, so we played a little of the show, and he goes, oh, that's really, really good. And he goes, do you know any tunes? And back then, Las Vegas was heavy jazz players, and you had to know your standards. Mm-hmm. And so I knew the answer was yes, but the truth was no. I never took the time, wasn't interested in learning any of the standards. You know, I liked the band Yes and Tower of Power, and that's what I wanted to do. Anyway, I didn't know what else to say. I didn't mean to be arrogant, but what came out of my mouth was, I know any tune you know. Don't know why that flew out, but it did. And he was like, oh, really? Okay. So he starts to play, but what he didn't realize was I was seated behind him. I play piano, so I could see where his hands were going and make a 80 to 90% good guess at what chord he was going to go to. And he was very good and played a lot of leading tones, so I could also hear my way around. So I followed him around the piano, and he goes, oh, okay, all right. So then the classic line, which I never thought I would hear in my life, was he goes, okay, and I'm ready to be hired. And he goes, don't call me, we'll call you.
Oh.
And I, wow, I guess I'm interpreting that as a no. So I go home, and a week later, the phone does ring, and he says, you're hired. You know, you start in a week, then show up. So I did. And so I went, okay, this works for me. So I show up and I go, okay, I'm in Vegas, but I'm really scared because I just figured the moment I can't read something or do something, then next.
Yeah.
So I show up and, you know, I feel I'm doing a really good job. And I was at the Flamingo Hotel in their showroom. And so I was all happy. I thought, oh, this is all great. So, you know, maybe 4 or 5 months go by doing show after show, and it's going really good. And he pulls me aside and he says, all right, I have to make an announcement to the orchestra after this show, but I'm told to tell you that it has nothing to do with you and doesn't apply to you, so you just listen and know this isn't for you. Oh, wow, that's the strangest thing I ever heard. The Flamingo and the Hilton hotels were owned by the same company. So their showroom, you know, they would, all the same contractor hired for everybody. And I went, okay, so great. After the show, the conductor comes out and says, everybody, you're all fired. And I went, what? Oh, yeah, wait. Somehow this doesn't pertain to me? What? So, okay, after everybody gets the bad news, the conductor pulls me aside again. They called it the Big Store, which was the Hilton, which had Elvis and Ike and Tina Turner and a little bit larger acts than were at the Flamingo. They said, they're watching you. They don't want you to go anywhere. You're going to continue to receive a check every week. Don't go anywhere. Just wait by the phone and, you know, something will happen. So I went, wow, that's incredible. Nobody else got that. And so waited and, you know, a couple weeks went by and then they said, okay, we want to put you somewhere, but we don't quite know where yet. So go over to the Hilton and they have a Benihana restaurant. Yeah. And in there, above the restaurant is a big glass booth, and we're going to sit you in there with a few other guys, and this act comes out and they do karate, and every time they chop at each other, we have music that you play while they do that. You go do that for a while. So, okay, that's crazy. I'll go do it. So I did that for a couple months. Again, the conductor pulls me aside, a whole new conductor, and says the same thing. I've got to make an announcement. Has nothing to do with you. Same thing. All right, everybody, you're fired. Gig's over. Pulls me aside and says, wait by the phone. And so, still going to get a check. We don't want you going anywhere. So then I get a call again saying, okay, now you're in the Big Store, they called it. You're in the Hilton where, you know, Elvis comes in, Ike and Tina Turner, Anne Margaret, all these big acts at the time. And I went, wow, scary, but I'm in. So I show up and I figure I must be doing a good job because they just keep paying me not to go anywhere. And I figured, okay, I got to keep up what I'm doing. The first show I played was Anne Margaret. And I went, okay. And I look at the chart on the first day, and I had never seen so many sharps and flats in my life. And I went, oh, wow. To those people that don't read, that means every note that you look at isn't really that pitch. It's a half step up or a half step down.
Yeah.
And so once you get to 5, 6, 7 sharps or flats, you're like, whoa. A lot of the stuff was written out, and Anne Margaret had just done the movie Tommy with the Who, so it had some of the Who music in it, and I went, ooh, that I understand.
Yeah.
But it was a 40-piece orchestra, so there was a lot of music written. And so I'm reading through it, and I go, okay, scary, but I'm just going to play what I feel. And I can read the notes, but, you know, being young and saying things like, I know any tune you know, part of that was also, I have a better bass line than what's written here. I'm going to play that. And so I was playing loud and proud, plowing through the orchestra. And I see out in the audience, since it was rehearsal, there was an audience, but you had the arrangers and, you know, librarians and people that worked with the show out there. And I see the arranger looking at me. And he's got, you know, a drink in his hand, and he's all relaxed and keeps looking, and he's going, he's not reading what I wrote. I don't know if I like that. And I see him walking up the stage, and it ends, and I see Anne Margaret turn and looking at the orchestra, and I think he's going to call me out, and he's going to, you know, make me read something. But Anne Margaret kind of meets him halfway before they get to me, and she says, that is the most fantastic arrangement. What a great feel. Wow. And he looks at me and turns around and walks back off the stage. And I figured, I think I'm on to something here. Play what I feel. If I get called out, I can read it, but do what I do. So part of Las Vegas union rules is you have to have a day off. So I played the whole show, played what I feel. Next seventh day, and a whole new orchestra comes in, and of course that bass player goes around the whole strip and reads the charts, because, you know, he gets one shot at it. So
sure.
After that night, I come back on, and Anne Margaret was saying, you know, what happened to my groove? The feel wasn't there. What's changed? And they let her know that, well, a whole new orchestra comes in once a week. And she goes, no, I want that same guy on bass. I want him here every day that I'm here. So that would happen with each act that came in. And so then the big store came to me and they said, they're going to start to ask you to go on the road, and we don't want you to leave. So you got to stay. So here's the deal we're going to make. You get a check every week, whether you're here or not. You just promise you'll come back. And so that was incredible. So then I started touring with Anne Margaret, Shirley MacLaine, Raquel Welch, you know, anybody that came through that asked, I would go out. So kind of had this dual career of touring musician, Las Vegas showroom musician. And those were some great years that I spent in Vegas, and really built up a resume really fast of everybody that I played with. And then there was some fun with the Jerry Lewis Telethon that would come in from Vegas once a year back then, and I would get to go in on a different act. And I'm from the East Coast, so I wasn't able to really go back and see my parents all the time. So I'd say, okay, stay up till 5 in the morning, and I'm going to be on the telethon with such and such an act, and I'll wave. It was fun, good times. But I thought, this isn't exactly what I set out to do in music. I wanted to write and join bands and make records and record. And there was no real recording in Las Vegas other than an occasional TV special. So then I moved to Los Angeles. Funny side story, in Vegas, they had all these, once a year they'd have a TV show where all the different acts would come in, a variety show. And so they had this animal act come on, and this tiger was going to come out on stage and disappear. And I thought, oh, okay, this will be. So I'm in the back orchestra, and the curtains close. They don't need to see the orchestra, and they're bringing out the tiger, and he's on a leash, but the animals are used to working at night. And so now you've disturbed this animal and took him out of his routine. So he gets, and he's on cement before he gets to the stage, and I'm on the third tier up on the bandstand, and I'm, looking down on this action, and the tiger comes out, and he doesn't look all that happy until his nails hit the wood floor of the stage, and he's like, I've got a grip. And he just all of a sudden goes, there's no way they'll hold me, and the tiger starts to run, and the handler can't hang on to him because he's got tiger paw grip going down there, and everybody was like fleeing ants. The tiger's loose, and everybody's running around, banging on the men's room, the women's room, opening the door, closing it. You can't get in. I'm going to be safe. And I see all this cacophony of people running, and I'm going, I'm on the third tier. He's got to eat his way through the sax section, the trumpet section, the drums and percussion before I'm involved. So I enjoyed the whole thing. It was great. Eventually, they came out with a sleepy dart, and hit him with it just enough to make him not care. The show must go on. They leash him and they drag the sleeping tiger onto the stage to make him disappear. I had a blast in Vegas. There were so many funny stories like that. But as I said, not entirely what I wanted to do in music. And then from there, I moved to Los Angeles.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like you kind of had the dream going on in Las Vegas. I would have found it extraordinarily difficult to concentrate on the music, having like Anne Margaret, Raquel Welch.
Oh,
and, you know,
my gosh, absolutely. And then you play them for a while, and you go on tour, and then you have like professional friendships with them. They were so nice. Anne Margaret, Raquel Welch, Sherman McLean. They become friends, but yeah, at first it's rather distracting because they're looking their best.
Oh, absolutely. I can't even look at Beans the same way since I saw Tommy. So.
Oh, there you go. Whenever there was a part where they would have to walk down the stage off the riser and pass me, and the lights would come down on their dress, and sometimes it would make it a little see-through. So
torture.
Being young, I would just go, I'm going to memorize these measures so I can kind of look away for 5 seconds and get a nice glimpse.
So moving back to, I mean, we could certainly stay in Vegas, it sounds like, for quite some time with all the stories. But then you relocated to LA and California in general. And what did you do then?
Then I discovered I was able to support myself because I would still go on tour once in a while, but the key was to work in town, you got to be in town. So I kind of made a mental rule. I mean, there are 6,000 groups there trying to become famous. And so how do you decipher? And so I used to say, what's the music like? Do you have management? Are you making a record? And, that would knock, maybe a lot of them out, only leaving 1 million.
Sure.
So serendipity, my best friend. I had a friend I used to work with in Delaware and do casuals with, and he was, maybe 15, 20 years older than I was, and he moved to Los Angeles. So I had maybe somebody I could call. He said, I know somebody that's building a studio. And so they're doing a session. Why don't you give them a call and see if they need you? So I called him. I did a session with him, and his name was Frank Rosato, and his wife, Tully, was a singer. And so he was doing a session for her. And so we became incredible friends, and she and I became writing partners. So he did build a studio, and he used to get certain clients come in, and every time a client would complain, we need a bass player or this isn't working, my friend Frank would say, I got a guy. And so I would get a call, and I would come in and play and start to get sessions that way. Meanwhile, writing with his wife, Tully, we just wrote a bunch of songs for her and for us in general. But one of the clients that came into the studio was for Pat Benatar. Oh. And I think we had a session before they came in. So when her husband and manager came in, producer, Peter Coleman, I believe is the name. Frank had our song up, and he played it. And they said, who wrote that? Love it. And they said, that was my wife and her writing partner, Don Schiff. So he says that ask them if they mind if we take it. So we said, absolutely. Be on a Pat Benatar album, that would be great. And it's on her Wide Awake album, Wide Awake in Dreamland, Song 2, Side 2. And the album went gold. So we got gold albums for writing a song for Pat Benatar. And what was nice was Pat loved it so much that she wanted a whole album like that. And we were thrilled. It's like, we've got a lot of those kind of tunes, boy, to be able to fill up your album. Sure. But I think she was with Chrysalis at that time, and Chrysalis said, you're welcome to do that. You can fill the album up with all their songs and songs like that. But if it doesn't fly, we're going to drop your deal. So it's the only song that's kind of locked on the album, and we were honored enough that she loved it enough to want to keep it and go with it. So it's called Cerebral Man, and there you go. Look it up on the internet. Give it a listen. Beautiful song. Loved it.
Well, and LA is yet another place where there's so much musical stuff happening. If I'm understanding correctly, most of what you were doing was still, I'll say, conventional bass, because as we're moving forward, you have kind of I won't say transition, but you have progressed into playing extended range and are
Yeah.
kind of the face. When people look up, if you Google NS Stick, we see you. That's
Yeah, yeah. And it started with the Chapman Stick, same company, Stick Enterprises. But one time when I was in Vegas, they used to have, we'd get together with different showroom players and jam. And this one guy said, "Oh, I was just in Los Angeles, and I was playing for this guy, Emmett Chapman, who plays an instrument that's bass and guitar in one." And when I was playing bass, for some reason, I just mentally dreamed that I bet one day I'm going to find some instrument that does something like that. Premonition dream, I don't know. It was just in my head. And when he said that, I went, ding.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that guy's name? And he goes, Emmett Chapman. So my wife and I, we get in the car and we drove to Los Angeles, and I contacted them, and I saw the instrument and I said, I'll take it. This is going to be great. So I got one to put on to try before I bought it, and I thought, I'm a piece of cake, a bass, and I can do this. Well, the bass is tuned in fifths, and all the low notes are in the center of the instrument and work their way out to the edge.
Oh.
So it's like, whoa, wow, I immediately sound terrible. But I bought it, and it took 3 months of me going, But then suddenly, fifths on bass and inverted makes total sense. The low to high range goes so fast that in 1-2 fingers you can play your bass line. With the other two, you can stretch it over and catch melody notes, that it goes so high so fast you can play bass and comp at the same time with one hand, leaving your other hand to play melodies or fill out the chord. And I went, incredible. So I would then drive to LA to take lessons from Emmett for a while. And as my usual way, but this is how I wanted to play. It wasn't invented to be a bass and a guitar. He wanted an extended range instrument that incorporated the range of bass and guitar, but thought of more like a piano. And it's also in stereo, so you could put effects on one side that don't affect it. Incredibly well thought out. After a while, he said, I don't know who's getting the lesson here. You've really taken it in a direction that I wasn't intending, and beautiful, keep on going. So I went, will do. So I was starting at that time to get recording sessions. Time is money. Nobody wants you to say, do you mind if I experiment on your session with this new instrument I have? So I figured I would be met with a no. So I figured they don't know what it is. So I would go in and start the session with, here's my new bass. It's all you need to know. Plug it in, let's go.
Yeah.
And so I would start the session with the stick, and then, wait to see the response, and they'd go, that's an incredible sound, that's an incredible instrument, incredible bass, what have you got there? And I'd say, next time, ask for it by name. That was the Chapman Stick, 12 strings, comes in 10, 5 and 5, split in stereo. In 1999, Emmett had the first prototype of the NS Stick, same company, Stick Enterprises, but it was a co-design with Ned Steinberger guitars. Hence, when you see it, it looks like a Steinberger. It doesn't have the tuning pegs. It has 8 strings, low B like a 5-string bass, all up in fourths to a higher B flat. And so he said, will you come? He called Greg Howard, I believe, Tony Levin, just to give this new instrument a try. And so I went in with them, and I fell in love with it. I went, this is my answer to being able to not only, as I told Emmett, you can tap this just like your stick. I said, but now I've got my pluck back. I've got my pick back. I don't have to carry a bass and a stick, to get that similar pluck sound. And I said, this is an incredible invention. And so he said, all right, this is a prototype. Why don't you keep it for a year and let me know what it does before we mass produce it? So that's what I did. I was just so happy. I love this instrument. I love them both. There's some things that the Chapman Stick does. You have a better ability to grab more notes, bigger arrangement at the same time. Mm-hmm. With the NS, you have more of ability to pluck, pick, tap. You can even slap and strum the chords at the same time, giving you, far flexibility in what you want to say in music. Anyway, that's how I adapted to that, and then got most noted for playing that instrument, though it does cover the bass territory just well. On some sessions that I was doing, the producer just started calling it the Bass Plus. Bring the Bass Plus. It plays bass, but it does more. Bring that.
There you go.
So one of the nicknames for it. And most used in a band that I came upon called Rocket Scientists. Out of a session that I did for them, I was hired from that studio that I was talking about, and they said they needed a bass player, and I think in odd meters as well, so it was a nice match. And after I did that album for them, the two originators, Eric Norlander and Mark McCrite, said, you know, that style of playing really kind of shaped our sound. Let's make him an honorary member. So then I became one of the 3-man permanent members, and we have a lot of guest artists that come on and do things with the band, but it's basically us 3. Really them 2 plus me, Bass Plus. So that's how I found them. And I always say when they go, how'd you join Rocket Scientists? And it's how'd they come up with a name? And I always say, well, I got called into the session. And when I went into the studio, the door said push on it, but most people pull. And so I pushed the first time. So I went, that man's a rocket scientist. He figured the door out.
Yeah.
Just my little side story.
Very fun. And now you guys, Rocket Scientists is still active.
Yes, we don't tour that much or anymore. We did our last tour, I believe, last year at one of the progressive rock festivals, and it was our big last hurrah, per se, and we're not touring anymore. It was wonderful. There'll be a lovely video of that concert coming out, and I'll alert the media when it's ready.
There you go.
It's going to be beautiful. Yeah, it was fun because while we were performing, they showed all the albums, whatever song we played, what that album was from behind it. It was a big, giant screen, beautiful lighting. I can't wait to see it. I'm excited.
Very cool. Well, and since we're talking about sound, and we've talked about the Chapman Stick and the NS Stick, are there any other elements in your gear that are particular to give you your particular sound?
Yes, in general, sometimes what I like to do to give it a specific sound, speaking of the NS Stick, like I said, straight fourths, it divides in half, 4 and 4, stereo. So a lot of times I just play it like an 8-string bass, but when you compress it, if you put one compressor on all 8 strings, the bass strings will compress nicely, and then when you get to the top strings, it'll like really shut it down. So I use 2 separate compressors, but what's really nice about the NS Sticks in general as a bass, strings gauges get smaller faster. You have so many strings compared to a 4 or 5 string bass, the gauges stay pretty thick. It's nice. What I love in the NS as a bass, as I go higher and the gauges get thinner, the tone of the bass notes gets more melodic. And so maybe as I go higher into the last high 4 strings, I'll put a little bit of reverb and pan it out. So when I get up into my more melodic color tones, the bass blossoms as I go up there. And then as I come back down, you don't lose that chest kick center of the bigger gauge strings. It was a great discovery, and that kind of gives me my sound of, wow, you know, it's so nice and even. And when he goes up higher and plays those cool high bass notes, it just becomes melodious. And it's kind of a nice signature thing to have, plus being when you go and you tap in those higher strings too. What's nice about it, you can really hold down the fort with one hand, keeping that center bass kick, and then add these high harmony, cool notes that really assist the rhythmic capabilities of your bass line. So then again, it becomes like bass plus. You're really controlling that line with the rhythm, with a structure of harmony. So your bass line really comes through just as you felt it, not depending on somebody, other instrument, lending an ear to it.
Sure.
Like, it gives you total control of what you want to say as a bass player. And I guess I then become an egomaniac. Yeah. No, it's going to go this way, as I say so, with many hands and fingers.
Yes. Well, and where do you get strings for something like this? I know the conventional, 4 to 5.
Right. You can, Stick Enterprises is my go-to because they come in sets of 8 and sets of 12 and 10. And of course, being a bass player, when I first got the string and I would talk to Emmett and I go, Emmett, you don't play bass. I know. And so I would change his gauge and put like all bass strings on the bass side. It was horrible. And so I told him, and I said, I tried it. And he goes, don't you think I tried that too? And he says, just because the gauge is thinner doesn't mean that it doesn't give you a great bass tone. And so I went, oh, he's thinking. So yeah, I stopped challenging him then on, oh no, I know better. He's thought this thing out. Incredible bass, incredible string gauges. So I just go, okay, yeah, give me the string gauge, and they come in heavy, medium, and light. So if I work with a singer a lot, I tend to, coming from a bass, I hit the strings really hard. You don't need to. It's a light touch that really gives you a beautiful sound. But, you know, for 40 some years, all I did was play bass. So then I'll go to a heavier gauge so I could really pound on the string and not change the pitch so readily. But again, for those that pick up this instrument, the light touch, and it goes on bass too. You get the most beautiful, richest tone with a light pluck. And then you'll get a different tone, not necessarily bad or less than. It's speaking something different from the string, but I always have to remind myself, okay, this is a really nice bass line that needs the best tone possible. Stop being a gorilla, pluck it lightly, it'll sound better. But, yeah, I have to reel myself in.
It is one of the challenging areas, especially with extended range basses, the sticks. I mean, it is. There's a lot of militant belief, but it's how you get your sound. And I've heard from a lot of musicians that even getting into a studio with it, some of the extended range players would show up with their instrument, and somebody will go, "Don't you have a P bass?" And
right.
You know, it's like, I can give you what you're looking for. Let me do my thing. So.
Right. But there's also something to that, because I have a P bass and a Rickenbacker jazz bass, all my sticks. I can get those tones or something similar to it on the stick, but being a bass player at heart, I understand. P bass has its tone. It's 4 strings. You're not going to dive down to a low B. There's a pocket for 4-string bass.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I get it. Same with the Rickenbacker. And sometimes I'll do a session and they'll say, no, we want the Rickenbacker, or no, we want the P bass or jazz bass. I have those. I'm a bass player. I cover all basses, including the NS stick, the Chapman stick. Those are great basses too. For me, what I like to say is on those instruments, the extended range, it's not that, oh, my bass goes to infinity. It's, I can create that 4-string pocket bass line and surround it with something else that makes it more enjoyable. I can come up with the perfect voicing that supplements that perfect, cool, easy bass line. It doesn't have to be something that looks like this.
Yeah.
It could be something really easy, but with the right voicing and the right tonality and rhythm around it, it brings out this bass line. So it's okay to have a lot of strings and play something simple. It's all about what you want to say as a bassist and how you can arrange around that. And that's what I found about the sticks, of what I could do. Could do it all internally and match my rhythm around it with an arrangement. So, and you could also be the guy that's like the solo piano player that stands in the corner, and I've got the solo going and I've got the bass line and the harmony going, and that's all really well and good. The beauty of the instrument, it isn't designated to that. It plays with other instruments great, and doesn't have to be the feature. It could be the accompaniment as well. That's why I love it so much. And when called for a session, sure, if I don't know the people, I'll bring the P bass and the Rickenbacker bass and my plethora of stick and NS stick. It also comes in half fretless too, which is a lot of fun too. One time when I was touring through Japan, I went to a music store and they had a fretless guitar, and they went, oh, that's fantastic. I must play that. Yeah. So I went to play and then discovered my finger's not straight as a ruler. It's not a fret. It's almost impossible, if not impossible, to play a fretless guitar chord. I figured, okay, good solo instrument. So then somebody ordered a full fretless stick, and I figured, oh, that's going to be rough. Doable. You know, you're not playing a chord in one hand, so I could certainly line up my fingers along where the fret would be. Doable. It made little sense. I went for the half fretless, bass side fretless, top side fretted. That works great on my half fretless. And they go, yeah, but what if you want the really high notes fretless sounding? And I go, well, then I just play way, way up here to make that happen. My right hand will always be perfectly in tune. My left hand will sound fretless, in tune, but have that good wow vibrato going.
Very nice, very nice. Well, and as we look ahead, I know we're currently still speaking, hopefully, at what we're thinking may be kind of the tail end of the pandemic. Things are not quite back to normal. What are your plans for the future? What are you thinking of doing?
Well, looking at everything positively, as I like to do, the pandemic brought us to a bona fide era of home recording. And before the pandemic, I was, like my wife said, I want to move to Napa, and I lived in Los Angeles. And I said, yeah, but I'm in Los Angeles. And she says, when's the last time you went to somebody's studio? She says, you always record at home and send your tracks. And so, still afraid, but wanting to be married. I said, okay, we'll move to Napa. We'll give it a try. So I built my studio up in Napa. And one of my first sessions was for Abbey Road Studios. And I went, oh, I always wanted to go to Abbey Road. They said, yes, your notes will go to Abbey Road. You, my friend, will stay home. So, worked out. So what the pandemic has brought us is faith in that we can do tracking from home. You need to know how to track your instrument really well. You don't have to know necessarily how to mix. They're not going to send it to you to mix. They're just going to hire you, send you the track. You record your part really well like they would. And what's nice is then you're on your own time to experiment. I wouldn't have to tell them that my stick was a bass if it was back then. I could just say, hey, how do you like this?
Yeah.
I'm on my own time. And then you send them that track. So I think in the future, people will really rely on that a lot more. Like, hey, we save money. We don't have to fly a guy out. Not always the perfect way to do it, but a good way to do it in a lot of circumstances. So I think in the future, I will be doing a lot more work like that. Same with doing film work. I've done a little film work during the pandemic, and same thing. They send you the movie, you import it into your DAW, you write the music around it, you send them little snippets as they go, and they either say yay or nay, and then you fix, or then you keep sending the tracks. And I look forward to that, doing more home recording. It's very relaxing. What I do miss is maybe the direct response of them guiding you so you don't have to do things twice. And the only other thing I miss is eating their donuts and drinking their coffee. Got to buy my own and get my own lunch, but okay, I can do it. And then, of course, you get paid through PayPal or Venmo or however that worked out. So you don't have to have somebody hand you a check or let you know that, oh, it's in the mail. Don't worry about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Venmo's in the mail. I don't see it yet. Oh, okay, there we go. You get your tracks.
There we go. There we go.
It's all good.
Well, excellent. And if people want to stay on top of what you're doing, the best place to look is donschiff.com.
That's one. I'm not so swell at keeping that up. You could go to Don Schiff 1 on Facebook, and then I kind of use that like my blog until I figure out how to link everything up to my web page, which I always say I will do. And it's been years now since I made that happen. The donschiff.com is still active, and you can contact me through that very easily. But my day-to-day doings is on Don Schiff 1 on Facebook, or if you just put Don Schiff 1, it goes to my artist page. It's not as funny as the Don Schiff 1, so I recommend that one.
Gotcha. Well, at least it's not a MySpace page, so you've moved on from there.
And I'm not on AOL.
Not on. So, yeah. Well, Don, we appreciate you taking time to chat with us and tell your story. Folks, you've seen him here. Don Schiff coming to you live on Bass Musician Magazine.
Oh, thank you so much. And please, I will look for your magazine every month now and check it out. I appreciate this time that you've given me. You were a wonderful interviewer.
Oh,
really smart man. You know how to handle it. You did great. It was so pleasure, and I felt at home right here in your home. Thank you.
Thank you.